I checked out the world's biggest Daggerheart actual plays to see how pro GMs immerse their players. Let's start with Mark Humes over at High Rollers, before we move on to XP to level 3, then finally on to Daggerheart Daddy himself, Matthew Mercer. The first thing that stands out to me about the way Mark Humes runs this Daggerheart session is the way he makes the setting his own. Orcs and elves in this world have distinct traits not found in Daggerheart's raw rules as written. But in the spirit of Daggerheart, these are traits you could create with your players. What makes halflings unique in this setting? What makes magic users unique? What are the gods like? You can work with your players maybe in a session 0 to make the setting truly unique to your table. But what makes what Mark has done here really cool is that he's converted his custom D&D setting into Daggerheart. He took the world he and his players have been playing in for years and made it Daggerheart, and the reality is, it's not that hard to do. Remember, he's not converting any of the player characters here, but he does have certain species in this world that don't exist in Daggerheart. So he and his players just reskinned Daggerheart ancestries to match. For example, in his world, there are rabbit people, and the player wanted to play this ancestry, so they just took the Daggerheart fawn and reskinned it. Critical Role have also shown how to take D&D characters and remake them in Daggerheart in the past, but honestly, this can be a lot of work, but it is possible, and maybe even a fun exercise. But for most people, probably not worth it. But yeah, Mark Humes takes the world of Daggerheart and makes it truly his own. And while we're speaking about world building, Mark Humes knows the world on a macro level, meaning the smaller moving parts can be a lot more loose, and coming up with complications is a lot easier because of that. For example, the first role of this actual play is a player asking if their character has heard of this criminal faction. The role was a success with fear, so the outcome was that the character has heard of the faction and is not on good terms with them. A success with a complication. Mark then asked the player to give them the name of an NPC who works for this criminal faction. A great example of Daggerheart's collaborative storytelling. But the reason Mark was so comfortable improvising this character's relationship with the faction and allowing the player to create an NPC on the fly is because they knew the bigger picture. They know who the faction are, their overall goals, and how they fit into the world. So the micro details, things that affect the players or individual NPCs, become much easier to change and shift around. This would have been a lot harder to do if Mark had already planned out the players' connections to the faction and planned out all the NPCs in the faction, if he knew the world on a micro level. And this goes for story as well. Knowing the world and story on a macro level, understanding systems and how everything slots together, beginning, middle and end, is great. Concentrate on that big stuff, because the hope and fear mechanic and the collaborative improvisation of Daggerheart will handle all the small stuff for you, if you want to play the game like that, of course. There's also a great example of Daggerheart play here, at least rules as written, where Mark asks a player to name a tavern, and the player then, while role-playing, pretty much creates the tavern for him. Now this is definitely not for every table, of course, but if you have creative players who like to world build, let them build the world for you. It's a weight off your shoulders as a GM, since you can just keep asking the player for more info about the place that they created, rather than creating it yourself in the moment. Of course, this is better for GMs and players who are more comfortable improvising. Also, check out Mark's fear tracker here. It's very simple, just moving tokens from one bowl to another, but it gets the job done. Next, onto Arcane Arcade. Jacob from XP to level 3's actual play. This is another GM who has embraced the player collaboration aspects of Daggerheart. Jacob actually leans on his players a lot. They help him sort through the cards, narrate environments, and all around run the game. I was really surprised and impressed. If you're the type of GM who is okay giving up some control, then playing like this will make your life less stressful, and it will make your players straight up more engaged because they have so much more stakes in the world that they're helping create. Jacob also asks his players to read their abilities when using them for the first time. I'm going to presume your table is new to Daggerheart here, so learning as you play is the best path forward. Players reading their abilities out loud when they use them means you, the DM, and all the players get to learn how the systems of this game work. The more the other players and the GM know about how your own character works, the better the game will be in the long run. And I'm not saying always read out all your abilities as you use them. I'm just saying at the start, while everyone's familiarizing themselves with the system and these new classes, give context to what and why you're doing things. And going back to Jacob leaning on his players for help with narration and the story, Jacob will also even ask his players to describe how they succeed on checks sometimes. This offloads a ton of the mental gymnastics GMs normally do for the players. I've seen a few complaints about Daggerheart of people not liking that as a GM they have to come up with so many more outcomes for a role. It's not just succeed or fail by how much anymore, it's succeed with complications, succeed without complications, fail with complications, fail without complications. But if you're a GM who does not like having all that put onto you, you can just ask your players to do it for you. It is really interesting to see so many different GM styles coming about already. Matthew Mercer plays Daggerheart while maintaining a lot of control over the world and the story. But here Jacob is handing so much control over to the players, which I think definitely helps a table to stay engaged because the ball could be tossed into their court at any moment. And of course, I'm going to keep repeating this because I get comments that say otherwise, but there is no right or wrong way to play Daggerheart, like most TTRPGs, but it does feel like no Daggerheart table will be the same, which I like a lot. And for anyone worried about giving so much control to the players like this, for example, asking a player what is in the room they just came in, because you have a player who maybe will just say, there's a chest of gold in here, I want the gold. Or, oh, there's a very powerful weapon in here that my character wants. Well, in my interview with Spencer Stark and Matthew Mercer, they brought this up. If your players are acting in bad faith, or just not understanding that story and narrative comes first, and they say there's money in the room, the GM can just say, for a second, you think you see money, but after looking harder, it's something else, like some narrative device or plot point. What the players say is not canon until the GM makes it canon. And don't be afraid to shut players down if they're not putting narrative and story first. If you find you have a player who continually is not playing in good faith, i.e. they're playing selfishly or getting in the way of other people's fun, it's worth talking to them, getting them to read through the player principles, page 9 of the core rulebook. And if they continue to not play the game the way it's intended, honestly, the game's just not for them. They probably realize it too. It's like playing basketball and one teammate just really likes to kick the ball and tackle other players to the ground. There's a game out there for them. Basketball's just not it. Okay, on to Matthew Mercer. Matt does keep more control in Age of Umbra, and that's fine. But he really makes sure that the players keep their agency. Every decision is their own to make. Matt just makes sure the players understand all the options and that they are all viable. You see this most when he goes out of his way to make sure the players know that it's fine to choose going unconscious during death moves. Ashley Johnson is really unsure what to do with her death move and is looking around the table for someone to help her make the decision. But Matt and the whole table make sure they don't pull or push her one way or another. Well, kind of. They do try their hardest to make sure Ashley understands there is nothing wrong with avoiding death and just going unconscious. There's no shame there, but it is really nice seeing such an uncompetitive table. Also, I have to say, I love death moves in this game, especially watching them in actual players. It's so much more engaging than D&D ever was because there's instant results. And next up, Matt may hold a lot of control in his games, but he does occasionally give it up, not just to allow the players to describe scenes or consequences, but to allow the dice to do so also. He has a great phrase, let's find out. If a player attempts to find out information, say if something is true or not, then roll for it. Just be prepared to add a consequence if the roll is with fear. Mark Humes also did this. A player may ask, do I see any suspicious stuff in this room? And the GM says, let's find out. Roll an instinct check. It's a fun way to play Daggerheart if the GM literally does not know what is in the room yet, and they are finding out with the players. Also, to interrupt, if you like these kinds of Daggerheart videos, let me know by liking the video, commenting, subscribing, or even checking my bonus content on my Patreon, which funds videos like this. The reality is, I want to make more videos like this about Daggerheart, but I need more Patreons to do that. Okay, next up, Matt also reminds the players that they can attempt things however many times they want, but each attempt could lead to rolling with fear and complications arising. Reminding your players about this is really smart, but also I just love that this is in the system. One thing that popped up a lot in D&D for me, especially with newer players, is the fact that they would just want to retry things if they failed them. Oh, I failed lockpicking the door. I try again, and again, and again. Or more commonly, other players would want to attempt the same thing. Now there's ways around this, of course, primarily saying that the first attempt at something in D&D represents the best possible outcome for the whole party. So if the rogue fails at lockpicking a door, then that means everyone in the group would also fail. But that always felt weird if someone else in the group was way better at lockpicking lockpicking than the first person who tried it. The whole thing just kind of felt clunky to me. Daggerheart, however, gets around this by saying, sure, everyone can try to lockpick the door as many times as they want, but with each attempt, there's a chance of complications. Players are less likely to retry something over and over again if there's a 50-50 chance something bad will happen, and the more they try, the more chance that a twist in a story will happen anyway, and they can move on from this scene. Next up, Matt uses countdowns really well, and it's a great way to add pressure to a combat. And these countdowns can be counting down to something bad happening, like every time a player rolls with fear, a number ticks down, and when it hits 0, a ritual finishes, or more enemies arrive, or a powerful attack an enemy has been charging up is activated. But it can also be a countdown to something good happening, like allies arrive to help fight, or a mage finishes a spell to banish enemies. Matt uses the dice to count down every time a trigger happens. He changes the face of the die to be 1 lower, and he leaves this die visible to the players and reminds them what number is on there a lot. So the players are always aware they are on some kind of timer. This is a great way to keep players engaged and locked into the game, like the timers I use in these videos to let you know the end of a point is coming soon and I have a new point coming right after, so stick around. Except I don't have a new point because that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching.